And as I must say, it is an honor to be here this morning, to be part of this church, which I consider myself. I don't know if that's been accepted that way, but I am including myself. But it is good to see everyone and be here. The sun is starting to come out a little bit more. One of those where given the opportunity to preach again has been a wonderful thing. It's been almost 7 months since I last preached, since Misty and I moved back from Finland, Minnesota, up on the North Shore, where I had my first call. I was there for 2 years, and then needing to care for some elderly parents, we returned back to the Twin Cities and have been putting our house back in order. My son did a pretty good job. He'll be 28 this year. And he he was in charge of the house, but he wasn't a gardener and all those other things. So we have our garden going again and some of those fun things. And kind of our first Mother's Day back in the cities again. And miss being here, but it's good to be back. Preparing for the sermon this morning, I kind of started thinking about this reading and thinking a lot about that. I love my porch. We had in the parsonage up north a big picture window, which I spent a lot of time looking out of, getting some inspiration. I do the same thing here. And one of those where I look at is this idea of love. And especially on a Mother's Day, I can't help but not think of love. And this sharing we all have of being a child of parents. And this mother. Our mother wisdom that we have. And then I started thinking about, I do like music. I'm challenged by music. I've done a lot of those things. So I went back to the hymns and I started to think, Jesus loves me, this I know, for the Bible tells me so. So I'm like, okay, that's a great way. It's always a comforting one. VBS, Vacation Bible School, is always a popular thing for me. And then I also started thinking, another one popped into my head, and the Beatles, All We Need Is Love. So you're going to hear a lot about love, and I a little bit of a nerd that way. So apparently in that song they used the word love 76 times. I did go through my sermon, and I only used it 35 times if I remember everything in there. But there's this matter of, we hear this word love, but what does it mean? And thinking about love, that's when I started thinking about unconditional love. And especially love from the Spirit. Jesus promises that we're not going to be left alone. But sometimes we do feel left alone. So all of this love that Jesus has for us, that shares with us, the Spirit that's sent to us, sometimes I think I fall short of what this love is. I have to admit that sometimes when I'm driving, I don't feel love when I'm cut off. Or someone is waving at me in hand gestures that don't look like friendly waving or something like that. Of course, not that I caused any of this. But then it's also, where does this love lie in truth? It's always my hope and prayer that everyone tells the truth. And it seems like sometimes truth is a very precious commodity these days. So in my attempt to overwhelm you with love, not to be naive about love, I think we truly do need a little more love, especially recognizing what that love is. And that's when I look at our gospel reading of this spirit of love, that God is love, that Jesus is love. To simply imagine having your only child given away for the love of the world. But that same love regenerates and creates for us this wonderful both and. This promise that we have this love with the recognition that there is evil and hate out there. And where do we go with this? So then I can't help but think of my own background. And I mentioned having a few moms out there. So I was adopted. And I was adopted at 5 days old through Lutheran social services. And I didn't know my mom for 58 years. And that is my biological mom. So not knowing your origins, or being denied your origins, or not recognizing not only your origins, but who you can become, can be a very difficult thing. So I've then also been very interested in genealogy. And not that I'm that old, but in Minnesota, only 2 years ago did they unlock adoption records. And I think for all the wonderful legislatures and people that came through to get that done. Fortunately, I'm also, or I shouldn't say fortunately, I'm also very frugal and thrifty, so even for the $40, I can't afford that. But I have wonderful children, so if you're familiar with, they got me 23andMe, and I'm like, wow, so that opened up some new things for me. Because the things I did know, and I'll sort of skip around, you know, I do that at times. But when I was adopted, my adoptive parents, who I love dearly, so that is my mom. She lives out in California now with my sister. She'll soon be 90. And I was told I was 100% Norwegian and from a musically talented background. So Vicki could probably analyze, so no, it didn't really wash through, but you know. So I had this going. So those are the things I hung on, that I was Norwegian and musically talented. So I've tried numerous instruments, and again, I'm okay at them. But then also the Norwegian thing. So I went to Concordia language camps and learned Norwegian. I went to St. Olaf to be a Norwegian major. And they'll talk about, what are you going to do with that major? And it's like, well, I don't know. Anyhow, so it's one of those I've always, so 23andMe, I did that, and it looks like, well, because I always kind of wondered, and they started doing those commercials too, where, oh, I found out I was Scottish or this and that, and people are like, so you're like, you're betraying this genealogy. And I have a German last name, and it, you know, that comes with baggage too. But it's one of those, you know, I love those German folks as well. But it wasn't until we got, I think it was you got me Ancestry, and I'm not paid by these people by any means at all. So, and wonderful information coming in. So suddenly I saw these relatives coming up that I didn't know existed. And then my cousin suddenly gets a hold of me and says, this is kind of weird. It looks like, you know, we have this relationship. Who are you? And I'm like, well, I'm this. I was adopted then. They're like, well, that's pretty cool. But there was pieces missing to this puzzle. Turns out they live in Minnesota, over in Wilmer, so it's one of those because of some certain confidentiality things. I don't say names, but he got to contact me. They came and visited up in Finland, that they being my cousin and his sister, my other cousin, and then my aunt showed up. So suddenly I had this big family. And then we're all like, well, who's the mom? But backtracking a little, the more fun to this, well, who's the dad? It's like, you know, it's because one of those things. Because on the birth certificate, unfortunately, again, we can change. Oftentimes the mom, well, even this day, is holding the bag on the whole thing, and dad sometimes gets to be a blank. So we didn't know who the dad was. One of my 3 uncles, or 2 uncles, there was 3 brothers. One's the dad, one didn't know, and the one just passed away. So of the 2 there, they're kind of, you know, as I'm getting this secondhand, well, who do you think it could be? You know, the 2 brothers, well, it me, you know, they're going back and forth. And that's why I say I don't know the total situation, and that's where it can be one of those between, however, you know, I'm here, so something happened. Don't need to get into all that. But it was a matter, they kind of decided it was one of these 2. So that sort of, we let that cool down, because all of these new relatives, the cousins were super excited, other people were excited, but the birth parents maybe weren't quite that excited yet. And I totally understand that. I had tried to make contact with them because all I wanted to do was thank them. Thank you for having me. And that was the biggest thing I could say, is there's other options there, and it was one of those, they had me. And fortunately, I have my legal mom, my mom, but then I have this biological mom. So that's why I say Mother's Day has always been kind of a strange thing for me until 2 years ago, when I figured out then we're sitting up at the 4 Seasons in Finland, Minnesota. Not the 4 Seasons, but a different 4 Seasons. So I'm there with my 2 cousins, my new aunt, And then we're on their phone and they're trying to figure out, well, who could this mom be? And I'm sorry, my aunt wasn't there yet. And then my cousin gets on the phone with her mom, and we're talking, well, who could this be? Who do you think it could be? And all of a sudden, this huge pause. I mean, like the life came out of the balloon with no sound. And suddenly, it clicked for my aunt that this was the reason why my mom suddenly was no longer part of this friend group anymore, because she was sort of back in the mid-60s, sequestered away to go have the baby. Even though I'm all Norwegian, I was born at the Swedish hospital, which is no longer here. But that's okay. I make fun of all that because I just love where we all come from, because we all share that. Short of the story was, I found out who my mom was. She wasn't real wanting to, and that was the same thing. And I totally respect that again, because she has a whole new life and all that there, but gave me this life. So it's that sense of love and thanks for all of those pieces. So on this Mother's Day, that's why it's one of those where I can see, because I lived some of that pain, because I want to go up and give this person a hug and say thanks. But at the same time, I know that that's not my place. But it's also the spirit of love that I think we all have, that hopefully when we hear stories of where we come from, we can share that. Because unfortunately, we do deal with stories that are ones that are difficult or painful. But we also deal with stories that support each other through love. So when we see these words that, I will not leave you orphaned, and I've always felt that. That's the love, this unconditional love that God gave me, God gave each one of us, that my adoptive mom and parents showed me, even, and I can't speak for my biological mom, the love that she must have had to have me, but to give me away. And that's tough love. The very tough love that I think Jesus supports us to go through. So in this world that seems so loud and noisy with hate, love is so much stronger. 4 letters can spell love, 4 letters can spell hate. And I think love has a greater power over that when we practice that. So that's when I say, I don't feel a lot of love when I sit there and catch myself doom scrolling and talking to Daniel. So sometimes I use the wrong, my kids always correct me, I'm on the interweb and all this, and it's like one of those, but it's one of those, it's hard not to get caught up into hearing those sounds, those voices. And I truly think that, yes, all we do is need love, to share this love with one another through our music, through our gardening, through our friends, through picking up the phone, even though my dear mom has now called us like the last 5 days in a row, because she doesn't want us to forget Mother's Day. It's like, okay. Again, she's going to be 90, so she sometimes is burdened with extra thoughts, and that's a good thing. But it's one of those where it is sharing that to pick up the phone and say hi. But sharing that as children together, and I think that's the important thing. So drawing us all the way back through this convoluted story is the hymn, Jesus loves me, this I know, for the Bible tells me so. But it's telling each other how much we love each other. And love is not a dirty word. It's one of those where somehow showing love for another, to tell someone, hey, I really love you. And it's really a comforting thing. And it doesn't take too much to hear that and do that every day. And with that, I ask you, just remember that all you do is need love and share that love. For this we can say, thanks be to God. Amen.